This is the Post Shift Podcast, a raw look at the hospitality industry. Good afternoon, Post Shifters. It is Shawn, and this interview is a special one. This one is with Bertin-Lang. She is pretty much behind most of the major events that go on in the US, including a whole bunch of events for San Antonio, so brand activations, the whole shebang. She talks about how she got into the industry, as well as being grateful for the industry, which I'm big on as of late. I really hope that you're enjoying the episodes. I've had a lot of fun. Claire has always been a sort of idol of mine, seeing what she can achieve and everything that she does. It sort of blows my mind. And really, I am selfish when it comes to this podcast about getting to talk to my friends and people who I may have not actually sat down and had a conversation with and getting to know them. So I really appreciate everybody's support, and I hope you're enjoying this episode.
The main reason I want to do it is like a lot of kids these days, I should say kids, a lot of people these days, we only ever hear the good things.
Well, yeah.
And when we hear the bad things, it's usually too late when we hear the bad things. And not so much bad, but realistic things is what I kind of want to get to. And a lot of people know you from Tales and everything else you do. But how did you even get into this?
Well, I guess I can go way back. I got the bartending bug when I was 19.
Yeah.
There was a bar I used to go to in high school, which was, not legal, but it was New York in the late 90s. And, I was just it was a kind of a Coyote Ugly-esque place. The owner of it actually was the owner of the bar that Lil from Coyote Ugly originally worked at.
Oh, wow.
So it really was like the precursor. His name was Tom McNeil, and they, him and his business partner, Chardy Raymond, consulted on Hogs and Heifers. I mean, they were kind of like the originators of the New York country western dive. And, kind of like the movie Coyote Ugly, I mean, the girls that worked there owned the bar. I mean, the customer was always wrong. Yeah. It was not, it was not a fancy or pretty place. We had $5 pitchers of PBR. And so I just kind of wanted to bartend. So they did open call, basically interviews every week on Tuesdays. That's what the turnover was like.
Oh, wow.
Because it wasn't an easy gig. I mean, we didn't have bar backs on weekdays, so we had to do we had to change kegs, we had to, get ice, we had to wash our own glassware. There was no manager. It was whoever was most senior on any given night was the manager. I say that with air quotes because there wasn't much management going on. It was cash only, so, a little shady, but it was good money. And so that's kind of where I learned to bartend, meaning, I learned how to interact with customers. I learned how to upsell. Mm-hmm. I learned how to drink a lot of shots. I learned how to make a lot of crappy shots that you would remember from the late 90s and early aughts, the surfers on acid and redheaded sluts and a lot of Jaeger.
Surfer on acid?
Yeah, so that was Malibu, pineapple, and Jaeger.
Ooh.
Yeah. It actually tastes a little better than it sounds, but it was not great. But, this was before bars used fresh juice. I mean, this was before Clover Club was open. This was before PDT, all that.
And anybody in the high-end cocktail side of things now,
people remember that bar.
Yeah,
I mean, New York bar, veterans remember the Village Idiot. I mean, it was, the best thing about that bar was that it was homeless people and stockbrokers all hung out in the same place. I mean, it was very highbrow, low. James Gandolfini used to come in because Sopranos filmed nearby. HBO Studios. I mean, it was a New York place, but it was a meatpacking district before that was trendy, and and then they got priced out. It closed in 2003. I worked the last weekend shifts, and the owner was literally pulling lights, neons off the wall and giving them out to people.
Oh, wow.
And it was really quite a fire sale. They had originally said that they were going to reopen, and then that never happened. But he still has 2 bars in New York, I believe. Anyway, that's a long-winded story, but that is kind of separate from how I ended up where I am, and it's only I was able to combine my experience from working at a really crappy dive bar with some experience that I had in when I was in college. At the same time, I was interning in a place that was doing events for nonprofits.
Okay.
So nothing bar related, but I had this sort of
Events at a nonprofit.
Right. Well, it was a for-profit company that produced big like galas for nonprofit organizations. So that was my first experience in event life. And then I was getting ready to graduate from college, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do.
What did you do at college?
I was a double major in government and theology at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. So church and state, basically. Yeah. And I was sort of leading this like triple life where I would bartend in the summers, and even on weekends, sometimes they'd call me and be like, come back. I was making $600 a night in cash when I bartended. Yeah. So, I would go back home for the weekends and pick up shifts, and I would work during the summer. But when I was home for summers, I was also like interning full time. I mean, I was, apparently didn't need any sleep. I would close the bar at 4 and be home at 6:30 and shower and go to my internship at like a big PR firm in New York. I think my junior year of college, and so I was getting ready to graduate, and I thought I was going to go to law school eventually. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, and I had a friend who knew somebody in PR at Absolute Vodka. And they were making lots of hires kind of all over the company. At the time, Absolute was owned by the government of Sweden. We were an independent subsidiary of the government of Sweden. This was 2005. So he sent my resume along, and I got the interview. I think it helped that I had a background in some knowledge of bartending and bar stuff. But the role I ended up getting mainly because the director of that division at the time, and I really clicked, was actually a sales analysis role. So I was doing sort of sales and marketing strategy and analysis. It was like planning and review, basically spreadsheets and whatnot. So, but by being there, I met Simon Ford. He moved to the U.S., I believe, in 2007.
Trust me, I did it in the lobby yesterday, and it was super loud.
Yeah.
But I wind down everything else except for us.
Well, so it is a cocktail conference, so glasses rattling and people talking in the background.
I just do a precursor and say, like I did Donnie's episode in Original Blanco during brunch.
Oh, yeah.
And Rocky shows up. And Rocky shows up and was like, hey, you fuckers. I'm like, thanks, Rocky. Cheers, buddy. Cheers.
And so when I met Simon, that kind of was a turning point for me. He was new to the U.S., having lived in the UK for all of his life. And he sort of showed up with not much direction from above, just to be the Plymouth Gin brand ambassador and do trade-related stuff. And I sort of saw him wandering aimlessly around the office and went to my boss and said, I'd really like to also do trade-related, like, events and whatnot. Like, can I help Simon out? And, my boss was like, well, as long as you get everything else done. So that was my first experiences with Tales of the Cocktail. We're working on the Plymouth Gin Bartenders Breakfast with Simon. We did a series of people that were in the U.S. at the time, either on the East Coast or the West Coast, would remember some like pretty baller dinners that we did in New York and L.A. We did a bunch of martini tours through time. These cool like bus tours in New York with Dave Wondrich and Ellen Katz, where we would go to all the old haunts and learn history and drink martinis, basically. And Simon really helped me realize that was the event production and sort of logistics side of stuff was what I wanted to do. And around that same time, the Pernod Ricard acquisition of Absolute Vodka was happening. And that took about a year for that to go through, at which point I'd been there for 4 years with Absolute. And when they finalized the acquisition, they decided that they didn't really need everybody that had previously existed at the company. So I was given a pretty decent severance and decided to join a company that doesn't exist anymore, but at the time was producing the cocktail side of all of the Absolute and Plymouth events. Mm-hmm. So by joining them, I was able to continue to work with the people I had worked with. And a few years later was when Simon became chair of the judging committee for Tales, for the Spirited Awards, and asked me to come on board and assist him with that as well. And so I sort of, he's been for sure one of my biggest mentors and kind of helped and guided me towards where I am. But also working for this consulting company, I got exposure working with a lot of other brands. We did a lot of the William Grant parties at Tales. We did, seminars and cocktail classes and this silly show that actually Simon just posted a 10-year anniversary of called On the Rocks that people forgot about.
I
This
watched
thing
that.
even happened. But, we helped produce, do the back of house for that. We did big events for Hennessy. They did a music series called Hennessy Artistry. So that's where I really got my like large scale event production experience. And, just all the tips and trade, tips of the trade and tricks of, batching and all of that. Around the same time was the very first Manhattan Cocktail Conference, so we were involved in that.
I'm doing this whole the whole podcast thing is self-serving because I get to sit down and chat and sort of figure out, because everybody's got a different story. I sat down with Haley Forrest yesterday because I really wanted to know how the hell we met in 2015 at BCB and how the hell you go from that to launching Italicus in the US, and in 18 months Italicus is freaking everywhere.
Right. Yeah.
And how do you find it? So for me, it's self-serving because I can sit down and then record it and then listen to it back.
Yeah, and also, I do think that there's a lot of people, in the industry that, the names are well known, but nobody really knows why or how that came about. And I do, think that like my journey in particular is very unique, in that I sort of took a path that was quite fortuitous. I was lucky enough to meet people and network with people and work with people. Another thing I was telling someone recently, like I've never taken the Bar 5-day class.
Yeah.
But when we were planning the first Manhattan Cocktail Classic, that was at Astor Center, where they were doing, I think it was year 3 of Bar 5-day. So I sat in the back on my computer. I didn't do any of the blind tasting. I didn't do the exams, but I basically sat in on Bar 5-day, whatever that was now, like, 8 or 9 years ago. And it's sort of just, luckily for me, each role that I've had, each consulting gig has sort of led to something else. Yeah. People sort of hear about me through word of mouth, and I've taken on projects that aren't necessarily cocktail related. Working music festivals now, and the cocktail side of it is very specific, but when you run events, it's just logistics and execution and attention to detail, and
so much post-production.
Sorry.
Oh no, I got a ton to do when I get back. So you're doing the music festivals and you're diversifying the events. Well, events are diverse. You don't have to do cocktail festivals every single time.
Yeah, and but I do kind of try to stay involved. And when BCB announced that they were coming to Brooklyn, my first instinct was like, this is my home turf. Yeah. And I had been brought on board for the resuscitation of Manhattan Cocktail Classic that never was. Yeah. And so I was still feeling a little bit stung by that. And so when Reed Expo announced that they were bringing BCB to Brooklyn, I knew I had to be involved. So I proactively reached out and said, how can I help? And, luckily they took a call, and then a couple of other calls with their logistics team, because they don't have a huge background, other than doing Berlin. Yeah. They do, Comic-Cons, and they do construction trade shows. They didn't know the intricacies of the New York, SLA and all the, liquor regulations and the distributor networks and all of that stuff.
And I think for the people at home, BCB is completely different in Berlin, is completely different to any bar show I've gone to anywhere else in the world. Right. The big the tasting portion, like where everybody's got full bars. And coming from Canada, you only can pour 2 ounces per guest. And then I bartended the Fernet stand, and they're like, okay, so how much do I pour? Like, where are the tasting? There's no full cocktails, there's your freezer. I'm like, excuse me, what? I'm like, this place is massive. There is something like 100 bars in the place, and you're giving away free cocktails? They're like, yeah. That's what we do. I'm like, holy crap. Yeah.
Well, that's not legal in New York, and we tried to tell everyone sample sizes only, and I was quite impressed. BCB this year for a first year event though went pretty smoothly, especially considering the number of sponsors, the number of, the amount of moving parts and just the build, One of my favorite things about doing events is that you literally walk into a raw space. Almost always it's a raw space. And, it's like you blink and it's an event, and then you blink and everything is gone. Bottle Rock, which is the music festival in Napa, is at the Napa County Fairgrounds. They literally build a village it takes 30 days for them to build the festival, and they tear it down in 3 days.
Wow.
And it's the first year I did it, I ran the VIP Suites, which was a 2-story structure that we called the cruise ship, because it literally was, we built bars, we had to figure out how to drain from the second floor, drain the ice tubs and stuff, the bathrooms and all that. I mean, it was its own little village, and it went up. And then, the next morning, the day after the event was over, they're already, pulling furniture out, wow. pulling things down, just demo, basically. And it's really pretty crazy.
So how many events are you doing a year now, on average-ish?
I do usually 4 to 6 large events, meaning multi-day events that I work on months in advance. So BCB, for example, my contract starts in January, but the festival isn't until June.
Oh, wow.
I do an event called Eat, Drink, SF in San Francisco. That's a consumer-facing food and wine festival in the Bay Area, and that contract is usually December to August. The event is in August. And International Chefs Congress, I run the mixology production and educational for that. And that I usually start a couple months out.
Is that consumer facing as well?
No, that's trade only.
It is trade only.
And that's very like front of house, back of house restaurant focused, chef focused, but they do have some, beverage and mixology content. They usually bring, a couple of big name people in each year from outside the city, and then, some people from the city as well. Star Chefs they do a annual series called Rising Stars in each city, where they recognize chefs and pastry chefs and restaurateurs and also bartenders. So they usually use the International Chefs Congress as a way to showcase their rising stars. And I never really, when I first started working with them, I never really understood why it was so influential until I talked to Jim Meehan, who had been given a rising star, I think, only shortly after PDT opened. And, he said that they were really the first ones to acknowledge what he was doing. And he kind of credited Star Chefs with having, put him on the map initially before the, Food and Wine and 50 Best and all that took notice.
And I think Star Chefs was an old program. Like it started way earlier than everything else.
Yep. For
so it's not like these lists you see now on every website from every city. It's like top 10 bartenders from this city. It was like the original.
And and I am consistently impressed. I mean, that's an event, as much as I'm focused on the beverage side of stuff, I do so many events in the food world that, I see all these, best chefs in the world all the time. But, backstage this year, they had Dominique Crenn and Danny Meyer on the main stage, and this was right before she got her Michelin 3 stars in San Francisco. And I'm just hauling ice, and all of a sudden Danny Meyer and Dominique Crenn are standing there, shooting the shit, and that's pretty cool. I mean, I don't get very starstruck over real famous people, but I have an affinity towards most chefs, and especially I like having seen a transition, I think, away from the Gordon Ramsay style of chef and towards the more respectful, the Adrias and the Krenns and the the people really looking to guide a new generation of people in the back of house and the kitchen, and to do it in a respectful way, because I've worked in bars that had, or restaurants that had the screaming chef in the kitchen that would throw a butcher knife at the GM because there weren't enough covers. And, that's not the environment that anybody wants to work in. And I think finally kitchens are moving away from that. So,
I got third-degree burns once from a chef because I was talking too much on the pass. He cranked the plate heater up. And so, he puts the plate out, and I got third-degree burns all on the soft skin underneath the knuckles and everything. You don't fangirl out too much?
I try not to.
I try hard not to fanboy out so bad sometimes. Well, because growing up in Australia, I moved to Canada in 2006. So, growing up in Australia, and the cocktail culture there was sort of getting kicked off, but it was just it was like internet times, so you didn't have tons of resources. And then came to Canada, started running Clives, and that's when we started getting tons of cocktail stuff and stuff like that. And I remember fanboying out when I first met Philip Duff. And then I think talking back the Plymouth the Bartenders Brunch, I think it was 2011 maybe, or 2010. and it was when the keys, so you could jump the line.
Yep.
We're out. And Duff just walks up to me in the Monteleone and is like, "Sean, I got something for you.
Yeah.
Enjoy your evening." I'm just like, "Whoa, my god!" And I'm walking past like Jim Romdale in line,
Yeah.
and they're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I got a key."
Was that was the year it was the motel?
Yeah.
So that I have a funny story about that year, where, again, I mean, if I'm doing my job correctly, or if anybody in the event world is, everything looks good from the front, even if behind the scenes it's a shit show. And we dealt with multiple fires. I mean, really big issues that year. The one of the musicians for talent got belligerently drunk and arrested in the middle of the night. So he was not able to come back for a second set. There was. But everybody else was, I think the AC was going out, ice was melting, we were over capacity, people were upset because they couldn't get in because they were outside, but everybody that was in there, they didn't know that the DJ wasn't supposed to be playing for as long as you, and as long as you.
It's like a duck on water. Like, you're just floating along,
and then
underneath this is like, oh my god, I gotta keep flat, yeah.
Yep, that's exactly, and I can say, I can say now that I've put out figurative fires and also literal fires. I did have a fire in the suite structure at Bottle Rock that 2 years ago, where a sterno set a tablecloth on fire, and luckily we put it out really quickly, and the people that were in the suite barely noticed that there was like
smoke all of a sudden,
flames and smoke. But you just gotta kind of keep an eye on stuff and be proactive and pretty much run instead of walk. I mean,
when you're in event mode, how many hours a day are you putting in?
On site, I mean, if I'm in charge of an area, which I usually am, I want to be the first person there and the last person to leave for my area. Bottle Rock is 9 a.m. to midnight or 2 a.m. Something like Star Chefs. Yeah, I mean, it's a minimum 8 hours is a short day. 8 to 12 hours is normal.
I always feel like it's the social media fake environment. You always see like the nice photos.
Yeah.
Like the gala at the end when you're all done up and you're like standing next to Danny Myers. You're like, oh man, she's got such a cool life. And then you're like, oh yeah, she's been up since 5 a.m. like busting butts.
Yeah, and it used to be at Star Chefs for International Chefs Congress that they would. That we needed to do all the juicing ourselves, and they would always promise me culinary student volunteers, and they'd show up for day one and stick around for an hour, and then once they realized that they had to hand juice,
hundreds of
all of a sudden they'd magically disappear, and I'd be the only one back there juicing, by myself. And but it's you got to get it done. I mean, it's not gonna do itself, and so if there's a box that needs to be moved, move it yourself. And, the good thing about doing events year on year is that I'm able to learn, from previous years. So we now have a juice sponsor for Star Chefs because I told them that I was no longer going to be able to be spending hours juicing. But yeah, I mean, it's a crazy lifestyle because I also spend a lot of time just like sitting on my couch and doing spreadsheets and hanging out with my dog. And then when event days come, it's on my feet, and I think my average steps at something like Eat Drink SF. Again, probably like a 12-hour day. I'm walking 10 to 15 miles a day in like an airplane hangar size space. So you're really just doing circles. And I'm going back and forth, and sometimes there's stairs, so it's up, down, back and forth. I mean, that's what it is.
Do you have a favorite event that you like doing, like one that you look forward to? Or is that really hard, or you look forward to each one for different reasons?
Yeah, I think I look forward to each one for different reasons. I mean, I'm lucky enough that I can I don't know that I turn down very many projects, but I pursue the ones that I know I'm going to enjoy.
Do you have trouble saying no?
If I'm available, I usually don't say no. The issue I've run into now is that I'm only one person and I can only be in one place at a time. And I appreciate. I work with some brands on retainer, so year round, I'm working with them to help on events, and I always have to send my blackout dates for them when I'm committed to other things. And, sometimes I'm doing double duty, as in the case of Bar Convent Brooklyn, where I was running logistics for BCB, but also Westward Whiskey, my brand client, was there. So I was kind of doing both at the same time. But I do feel bad telling, my retainer brand clients that we can't participate in a big event because I'm double booked.
Yeah. I do the same thing all the time. Like my wife hates it because I have a problem with saying no. So I say yes to everything. So going to school full time, working full time, and then doing my other stuff full time is like all the time.
Right.
And so she's like, you guys have to say no to stuff. You can't say yes to everything.
Yeah. I don't remember the last thing I said no to. I'm trying. I have something I think I have to say no to soon. But yeah, it's hard and I want to do everything. I mean, I want to get new experiences. I want to create new relationships and professional relationships and meet more people. And
how do you deal with work-life balance with traveling and stuff like that?
I mean, when I'm home, I'm very much a homebody.
Yeah.
I was doing the brand ambassador thing for a while, where when I wasn't traveling, I had to go out and do account visits, and I haven't done that for a couple of years. So when I'm home, I'm not going to cocktail bars.
Yeah.
I mean, I get enough cocktails as it is. So I'm sitting, watching Netflix with my husband and my dog and drinking wine. I mean, my drink of choice almost always is red wine, and I'm kind of cocktailed out after years of doing it. So I mean, I do think that I've gotten better at not having FOMO. Yeah. Whether it's in New York or if I don't go, I used to be like, oh, I really want to go to Camp Runamok, even though like none of my clients, and now I'm like past that, where I'm like, I don't need to go to Kentucky and drink whiskey for 4 days. Yeah. And I do, because I work for myself, the hardest thing is turning off the work part of it, where like, I mean, I personally would prefer to check my emails every day, 7 days a week, as opposed to letting them pile up over the weekend and having to spend 4 hours on a Monday morning digging
I hate
out.
that.
That's just, I mean, it's just how and I have time to do it. I've been trying to sort of get up earlier so that I have 3 or 4 hours in the morning to do whatever it is that I want to do before I actually start, doing work things. And because I do a lot of work with West Coast, U.S. West Coast companies, I'm able to, they don't start doing anything until noon New York time anyway. So I've gotten better at sort of giving myself the morning off or the afternoon off as as needed. That helps a lot. And then, they mainly understand that that they can't schedule a 5 p.m. Pacific time conference call because that's after hours for me. Obviously, it's a little more difficult. I was working with Stalwart Whiskey out of Australia with a couple of events this past fall. And that time zone is really crazy, trying to coordinate with David, the founder, on, just getting on the phone or, getting emails and whatnot. Because I believe his morning is our late evening. Yes. So we were trying to find times. But I'm not one of those people. I'm not like, I don't work out a ton. Like, I'm not like an obsessive. I mean, if anything, I'm like much more of a homebody, and I just kind of want to like hang out with my dog and my husband. That's not, I like to cook and bake sometimes, and I just try and like take it easy, because the travel and the being on my feet all the time is wearing, and I'm not as young as I used to be. I mean, I'm starting to see a chiropractor because all the time on airplanes was really messing with my back.
And you're tiny.
Luckily I can fit on both. I can fit fairly comfortably on airplanes, but at the East Coast, West Coast, travel is most of my flights are 5 or 6 hours. Yeah. So that's where it really kind of
gets you in the lower back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, me sitting on a plane is not the most enjoyable thing I've ever.
Can imagine.
Yeah. So flying to Europe 9 hours straight is a nightmare.
Yeah. And if it wasn't for Delta, luckily because I work for myself and I can kind of book my own travel, the piece of advice I give to anyone young that knows they're going to be traveling a lot is pick an airline and stick with it. Find the airline that does the most routes from where you are direct to where you think you're going to need to go.
Max those points out.
And because status is a real thing, and it's helpful. I once had an agent at Delta a couple of years ago, scan my boarding pass and looked at me. He's like, you're way too young to be Diamond. And I was like, man, you don't know my life.
What cocktail festivals that are coming up that you're really looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to BCB again. I mean, there's a couple that I haven't made it to that I would like to, and I mean, I would love to just see more more new ones coming up, smaller markets. I mean, I do really like this one here in San Antonio. I think that they do a really good job.
I like it a lot.
And
it's
I
my
like,
first time.
yeah, and I like the balance of consumer and trade. Last year was my first year not attending Tails in 9 years. And I honestly, I didn't miss it all that much. I mean, I probably will try to go this year. If my brands aren't participating, maybe I'll actually go as an attendee and actually get to do stuff, which I don't usually get to do all that much at Tails because I'm always running around. So, I'm looking forward to Tails if I'm able to do it. And I'm sort of blanking on like the other ones. I feel like there was one in Toronto, maybe.
The TOCC is I did that last year. And it was spectacular. Yeah,
that's, I think, one I'd like to check out. In the time that I've been kind of doing this, there have been so many that have also come and gone.
Yeah.
Golden State of Cocktails was a flash in the pan.
Yeah.
MCC has had a lot of issues. I was excited to experience BevCon, which moved from Charleston to LA last year, and now they're taking a year off. I don't think it went particularly well for them, unfortunately.
I find it weird because I see obviously Tails, this is my first year here. It's really understated. All the events are really nice. You can talk and walk around and stuff. And then you got all the New York events, and then the West Coast events just always seem to blip.
Yeah.
They start, and with such a wicked culture, and it seems like there's a lot of consumers that really get cocktail culture on the West Coast. But then when you do a festival, it just doesn't seem to translate.
I think it's also, not that easy to figure out how to reach the people that would, from a consumer standpoint, to reach the people that would attend.
Yeah.
And I think, what's strange and good about San Antonio is that it's a massive city. I mean, it's the 7th largest city in the country, but it has a very sort of small feel.
Yeah.
But there's so many just physical bodies, people here, that they draw big crowds just from locals.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there are people that fly in, not just, consumers that come in from out of state or from other cities in Texas for this, but they've managed to sort of capture that, the local consumer base really well. And they're a charity event that actually gives money to charity instead of just, saying that they do, which is also always nice. So I would like to see more festivals, more innovation, but it's also not an easy proposition. I've had, these sort of ideas of like, what if I, did a replacement for MCC, but, it would be a big investment. I mean, it would be a big undertaking. I would need some good partners and some financial backing to even consider it. But, it's also hard because you don't want things to be too repetitive.
Yeah.
And it can be, it can feel like it doesn't matter what city you're in, you're seeing the same people, and the same people are talking in seminars about the same things that, I do hope that there's a future that looks slightly different.
Smaller markets.
Markets, or, I still don't think anyone has quite nailed the food and cocktail event without selling out to big sponsors that take it over.
Yeah.
And in my role at Eat Drink SF, I work really hard to make sure that there's a balanced experience for the guests. I mean, that's a 99% consumer facing event. And, I'll tell brands, I'm sorry, we're like, well, one, we don't do category exclusivity, which is what all brands want. Because that's just, people are coming because they want to try different things. I'm not just going to force them to have your brand of whiskey, especially if it's something like a scotch. Not everybody likes scotch. And I'll also tell brands that I don't think are very, I won't tell them I don't think that they're good, but I'm not having anyone pouring Skinny Girl, wine at my event. I mean, there's a certain level of quality that, it needs to be in line with the overall, the high quality of execution of everything else at the event. But I do think that there's room for kind of a better combination of food
and cocktail.
Yeah, maybe it's, and especially because food is, so localized. I mean, there's so many markets that I think, some place like Portland, Maine could do like something really great around that. Charleston, as I said, unfortunately, BethCon has moved away from there, but I think, Charleston Wine and Food is one I've been meaning to check out because I don't think it's really taken over by the big brands yet. I would like to check out Pebble Beach Food and Wine just because it looks fancy. I've never been to Aspen Food and Wine because one of my brands participated last year, but it was 2 days after BCB, so I was not about to get on an airplane and go do another event. Well, also it's like hard to get there. It's expensive. You got to fly to Denver and drive 4 hours, and it may or may not snow, and all of that. So, but yeah, I mean, I do think that there's opportunity, and I would just love to see big brands, be a little bit more sort of understanding of what they're offering to consumers and what the benefits of letting people try different things are instead of force feeding them.
Rising tide rises all ships, that sort of thing.
Exactly.
So I think we should tie this off because I know you've got an event to get to and your phone's been going crazy. So I feel bad keeping you. One piece of advice for anyone who wants to get into events. I always ask because I'm always curious, like, what do you have to do to be like you?
I mean, I would say the thing that's, as we already talked about, if you're doing your job well as an event producer, from the front, everything looks easy and great. I mean, what I would say is make it look easy. But I was asked to participate in the mentoring sessions yesterday, and I told, somebody that was asking about events and how she should, structure if she's sending proposals, her fee and whatnot. And I said, what you want to do is sit down and make a bullet point list of every single thing that you think you might have to do for that event. I'm talking, taking out trash, carrying cases of water, figuring out ice, all that stuff, and bullet point it. And not just for your client, but for yourself. But it's helpful to send that to the client because a lot of people that hire somebody on the beverage side don't fully understand everything that goes into it, all those small details. I mean, I don't know where they think, ice comes from or where garbage goes or any of that. But I think giving yourself a full understanding of all the tasks that need to be done. And then, I mean, especially in year one, over-deliver. As I said, be the first person there and the last person to leave. If a box needs to be moved or something needs to be bussed. I mean, that's my biggest thing. If you're running an event and you see a table of dirty glasses or dishes or whatever, you should bust that table before you go find the captain of the catering crew and remind them that they need to be bussing. Don't walk by something that looks like a mess to find somebody to tell them to do it.
That's pretty good. I'm pretty happy. You're have any good closing comments? Well, I think we covered everything.
No, I think we did. I mean, I this might sound a little cheesy and sentimental, but I do think that this industry, despite some of the problems that everyone is aware of, is a very, very special one, and I feel very lucky to sort of have accidentally stumbled into it with sort of the confluence of events and from bartending at a really terrible dive bar to meeting people like Simon and Brooke Arthur at House Spirits and Westward Whiskey and all my friends. I mean, I do think it's a really special industry that has a lot of great things going on, and so I just hope that there are good, smart, hardworking people that can continue that because I'm not going to be able to do it forever. None of us are. We kind of age out of it.
We do definitely tap out very easy. Well, that's perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Sorry about all the
no, don't stress about that.
background noise.